Weather's turning a bit shittier.
Now before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content.
Well, so today I think we'll talk about riding in inclement weather. Now sometimes we get caught out in the rain as we've done today. Sometimes you set out and it's sunny and then it's Britain and after 5 minutes it's absolutely piddling down and it isn't sunny anymore. Other times, you know, you may be riding to work. I mean, I commute to work pretty much every day on a bike. So, for me, riding in inclement weather, and sometimes, certainly rain quite often, ice occasionally, snow, thankfully quite rarely in Britain, but you know, it does happen. But it is par for the course, really. Oh, now it's raining. In fact, it's hailing, wonderful. It's a really good example. Now, contrary to popular belief, we are not about to die because it's hailing or because the road's a bit damp. In fact, we're going to be just fine. And we're going to be just fine because we're going to ride sensibly. If you ride flat out and pretend it's still dry, you're going to fall off quite possibly. Although, to be honest, modern tyres do provide a lot more grip than you expect in damp conditions. They work a lot better than you think. They don't work as well, particularly in colder conditions, because tyres tend to rely on basically what tyres tend to do is they warm up and become tacky. In colder conditions or in damp conditions, obviously the tyre cools off, it becomes hard, not as flexible and not as tacky, so you lose grip. You do need to bear this in mind when riding in inclement weather. So the important thing is, if you're riding behind somebody, as Tom's done when it started to rain, behind this van, he's dropped back. The sensible thing to do in wet conditions is drop back. Disc brakes don't work quite as well in the wet as they do in the dry. Modern discs are much better than they were back in the 70s when they were god-awful in the wet. They were truly terrible. They worked well in the dry back in the 70s, but in the wet, forget about it. But nevertheless, your braking distance is going to go up markedly, so it is a good idea to drop back. And that's good advice for riding all weather anyway. I think a common mistake that you see most car drivers make is they drive up each other's backside, particularly when overtaking. You don't need on a bike, or in a car really, to drive so close to each other to make an overtake. Lewis Hamilton only does it so he can slipstream. He's essentially using a hole in the air to make the car go faster because he is racing. In road conditions, you don't need to do that at all. Quite often I'll be riding to work and I'll see somebody tucked up behind a tractor, mere inches away, pulling out occasionally trying to see around it. Well, of course, all you're doing is obscuring your own vision. You're making it much more difficult for yourself to get out. If you sit back and you want to make an overtake, you can build up a little bit of speed, particularly on a smaller bike or in a car where you have got bob-all acceleration really. Build up a little bit of speed to catapult you by, as long as you know it's safe to do so, of course. Another safe principle that I tend to employ in crapper weather, or inclement weather, for being polite, is I generally avoid braking as much as possible. You can do this quite simply, particularly on a bigger bike like this, like the Guzzi I'm riding today. It's got a ton of engine braking. Engine braking, for some reason, scares some people when they're talking about racetrack, because they think, oh, the back end's going to lock up and it's going to fishtail all over the place. Normal road conditions, that simply does not happen. You shut the throttle and it's rather like you've applied the brakes a little bit, but just lightly, and it's a really good way of slowing the bike down. It's also a very fuel efficient, a very safe way of slowing the bike down. I tend to roll on and off the throttle a great deal, and when riding quickly or slowly, if you're coming into a corner and you apply the brakes, you tend to make the bike nosedive a little bit, and compress the suspension a little bit too much. And it's also, if you're riding very quickly into a corner, it's very hard to judge where to apply the brakes. Whereas if I just back the throttle off as I approach the corner, I scrub off the speed more gently, the bike stays nice and level, and I'm much more likely to get a smooth exit into that corner. Again, that's particularly useful in the wet, where we don't want to be applying braking too heavily. Now, obviously these days, a lot of bikes are equipped, most new bikes are equipped with ABS, but we don't want to be over-reliant on that. It's not a miracle worker. If you're on an older bike, like this one, you're not going to have ABS, so you best make some allowances. Whoop, that's silly. So as I said, I tend to not brake that often. I tend to just use a lot of engine braking. The advantage of using engine braking is your brake pads last longer, your brakes don't overheat, it's lazier, because I am pretty lazy when it comes to riding really, and it's more fuel efficient also, because all you're doing if you run on to the last minute and then apply the brakes is converting all that energy that you've used to push yourself forward into heat in the discs. Why sooner convert it into forward motion? So shut the throttle. I've shut the throttle down. I can see I'm now dropping back a little bit. I haven't had to do any braking. I've just slowed down nice and smoothly. And certainly in wet conditions, it's much more advisable to do that if you can. Also, choosing the right gear through a corner can help in wet conditions also. Particularly on a smaller bike. If you're in too tall a gear, no matter how much you drop the revs, it's probably going to want to push you a little bit through the corner, and you lose that little bit of fine control. And in the same way, you don't need too low a gear also, because then, particularly on a more powerful bike, the thing becomes very responsive, and which is okay if you've got a lot of grip. It's not okay if you don't have a lot of grip, like in winter. So select a nice gear that's going to put you at an RPM where the engine is running nice and smoothly. It's above tick over, so it's not pushing you along, but also where when you apply the power, you're not going to be putting too much energy through that tyre and likely to spin it up in wet or icy conditions. And also wear sensible gear as well. One thing about riding in inclement weather is it's blooming cold a lot of the time. So I found that probably the greatest invention after the motorcycle is the heated grip. It allows you to ride all year round without going for the agony of your hands warming up as blood surges back into them when you finish the ride. So if you're going to ride all year round, they're an absolute bonus. And also making sure that you've selected sensible riding gear, that you've got warm riding gear with sensible gloves, your all-in-one suit and race gloves and boots. Might be okay in summer, but as soon as the weather turns a bit bad, you're going to be freezing. And riding cold on a bike is it's not much fun. I think the most important things really are your feet and your hands. If you can keep your feet and your hands warm, then you're probably okay. Once your hands get cold or your feet get cold, then you're going to be struggling. And it doesn't matter what you put on your body, you're going to feel cold. So the best thing to do is have a selection of gloves for various weather conditions, and to adapt accordingly. If you've only got an all-in-one leather, then what some people tend to do is put a jumper over the top of your all-in-ones, just to give it a little bit more warmth, because quite often the things fit quite snugly, and the way they work is they grip onto your skin, and they're designed not to slide around on your skin. Oh, it's another Guzzi. Lovely. Same as mine. Very nice. They're designed to grip onto your skin, so wearing a lot of undergarments isn't a great idea with those. They'll actually just slide around and they won't provide the protection that they would. You'll probably get a friction burn. So you're actually designed with being dressed quite lightly underneath anyway. You should be, you know, boxer shorts underneath an all-in-one leather, and that's about it. So if you want to add warmth and you're on an all-in-one, it's probably a good idea to add warmth over the top. Ice is simply a matter of riding very slowly, riding nice and steadily, keeping the bike as upright as possible. You don't put a lot of energy into corners, you know, and it's avoiding heavy braking, it's avoiding big throttle openings, avoiding any sort of large movement really, and being as smooth as you possibly can and be upright as you possibly can on ice. And also really keeping your eyes peeled and concentrating. What you're really looking for is darker areas on the road, which may indicate black ice, because if you hit those, things get very squirrely very quickly. So it can be pretty intense riding in winter. You really do have to concentrate. So I think the important takeaway message is that you can indeed ride in winter, particularly if you don't have an option. But it's very important to ensure that you and the bike are really correctly equipped to be able to ride in whatever conditions it is that you're riding in. So once again, stay safe, and thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you very much.